Welcome back to History Class with Dr. W. We're continuing our discussion of the Harlem Renaissance. And in the previous lecture, we talked about Marcus Garvey and how influential he was on some of the writers and artists who followed shortly after him. In this lecture, we're going to focus on two of the writers who followed in Garvey's footsteps, Alaine Locke and Claude McKay. Alaine Locke was one of the foremost intellectuals of the period of the Harlem Renaissance, and he's best known for a crucial essay that he wrote called The New Negro, along with other of his writings. Locke had been a Rhodes Scholar at Penn and earned a PhD in philosophy from Harvard University. He was celebrated for his work as a writer and anthologist. And it was in 1925 that he published his essay, The New Negro. In this essay, he overturned the idea of the old Negro, that he described as simple, submissive, uneducated, and accepting of inferiority. The new Negro built on Marcus Garvey's message of empowerment and pride. He would no longer accept an inferior role in society. Mistreatment would be met with resistance and militance. Now, Locke comes up short of describing actual physical and military resistance or armed resistance to white racism. But the new Negro would keep a watchful eye on any kind of mistreatment and discrimination around him, and would no longer turn the other cheek, as the, quote, old Negro had done before. Such ideas of empowerment and pride were at the heart of the cultural flowering of the Harlem Renaissance. One of the first writers to express this spirit was Claude McKay. McKay was born in Jamaica in 1889. He moved to the United States in 1912 at the age of 23 to study agriculture at the Tuskegee Institute. Already he was known as a promising poet and author, particularly in his homeland of Jamaica. But even some of his early experiences fueled his writing. One of his earliest works was written based on his arrival in the United States, in the southern port of Charleston, South Carolina, and the racism he encountered after. Having come from Jamaica as a respected and well-known promising writer and poet, he was unaccustomed to the kind of racist treatment he encountered in Charleston. And after that introduction, he wrote, "To the White Fiends. Think you I am not fiend and savage too? Think you I could not arm me with a gun, and shoot down 10 of you for every one of my black brothers murdered, burned by you? Be not deceived. For every deed you do I could match, outmatch. Am I not Afric's son, black of that black land where black deeds are done? But the Almighty from the darkness drew my soul, and said, Even thou shalt be a light, a while to burn on the benighted earth. Thy dusky face I set among the white, for thee to prove thyself of higher worth. Before the world is swallowed up in night, to show thy little lamp. Go forth, go forth." Blacks could meet violence with violence, McKay is saying, but rather they will stand above and take the moral high ground, thus showing themselves of higher worth than whites who relied on violence. By 1914, McKay moved to New York, joining into the Great Migration from south to north, along with so many others, and became an early participant in the so-called Harlem Renaissance. He spent time working as a porter and janitor, all the while writing. Gradually, his sonnets and poems won acceptance in white periodicals, and he began to develop a reputation as a serious writer. By 1919, he was accepted into the radical bohemian artsy set in Greenwich Village. 1919 was a difficult year all around, and particularly for blacks. The Great Migration and the resulting tensions in northern cities resulted in at least 25 major race riots. The worst came in Chicago in July. 38 black and whites were killed, over 500 others injured, and 1,000 families left homeless. In the wake of those riots, McKay wrote his most famous poem, If we must die. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. So the tone of this poem, about 5 years after the first poem we looked at, is a bit different. Here we have blacks fighting back rather than refraining from violence. We sense that McKay has grown more frustrated during his time in the United States. By the end of 1919, McKay had moved to England, and he would remain abroad throughout the 1920s, spending considerable time in communist Russia. On this journey, he concentrated most on discovering the place of Negroes in the modern world. He came to the conclusion that blacks exhibited a creativity and joy in life that whites in the United States and Europe had lost. So obsessed were they with work and getting ahead. McKay encouraged and celebrated African folk culture, in which he believed lay the salvation of the black race. Blacks should celebrate their heritage and their uniqueness and a group spirit. This emphasis on folk culture became one of the hallmarks of the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes, Jean Toomer, and others made it a major theme in their works. McKay's body of literature is extensive and diverse. Among the most noteworthy is Home to Harlem, published in 1928, about a black soldier returning from World War I to Harlem. There he encounters educated blacks and the ideology of the new Negro. In this work and others, McKay enunciates one of the difficult themes of the Harlem Renaissance, the relationship between the educated black middle class and the rest of the black masses. McKay is unique within the Harlem Renaissance for several factors. He actually never set foot in the United States during the 1920s, and he didn't become a U.S. citizen until 1940. He also was more worldly, literally, than virtually any other writer of the movement. He perceived the role of blacks the world over, not only in the United States. Also, his first successes were in white-owned magazines and periodicals, not black papers. But McKay did represent the movement in many other important ways. His move from Jamaica to the United States and ultimately north to New York and Chicago was not unlike the Great Migration that many other black Americans made from south to north. His rediscovery of Negro folk culture became a major part of the movement. And he offers excellent expression to the ideas of the new Negro, determined to protect his human dignity, cultural worth, and the rights to a decent life. So building on the ideas of Marcus Garvey, Alaine Locke, and Claude McKay, we come to the writers of the Harlem Renaissance itself. And in the next lecture, we will turn to a discussion of those writers and other cultural performers of the Harlem Renaissance.